Welcome. This is the Minding My Own Business webinar series. Today's edition is Delegation and Organizational Structure, brought to you by the Fremont Group. Fremont Group is a nonprofit organization who's been serving small business owners for the past 20 years. My name is Dirk Dieters. I'm the Executive Director of the Fremont Group. I am also the author of Minding My Own Business, which is the book that the series is based upon. You can buy it on our website or on Amazon. And I will be your presenter today. Fremont Group has a number of services and benefits for small business owners. Our target market are people who own and operate hands-on their own business on site. We have success partners, and this is our core business, our success partners, which is a network of people who have been there and done that. They're available for consulting, mentoring, and coaching. We also do outsourced accounting for small businesses. We sponsor a website, www.tfginfo.org, which I hope you'll visit. That site has literally hundreds of articles, informed articles on small business management and operation. We have a Patreon site at patreon.com/the Group. There we post also a number of articles. This is where we post our webinars and different things, and this is intended for the supporters of the Fremont Group. We have a Facebook page, and of course we do these webinar series, and we have Minding My Own Business, the book, which proceeds support our operations. Today we're dealing with delegation and organizational structure. This is in the Minding My Own Business Workshop series, which is a series of 6 webinars, and they go through the 6 responsibilities of the small business owner. First responsibility, which we covered in January and February, is that you must make a minimum mandatory percentage of profit. The second responsibility is to create cost controls to assure that that profit is produced. Your third responsibility, which is where we are now, and it ties in with this webinar, is to create an organizational structure that is responsible for enforcing those cost controls so that it produces the minimum mandatory percentage of profit. The fourth responsibility, which will be covered later in the year, as with the rest of them, is you have to sell internally and externally. Your fifth responsibility is after you make money, you have to keep it. And your sixth responsibility is you have to have fun. This organization and delegation is tied very directly to your organizational structure and the creation of your organizational structure. Everyone has one. It's a question of whether you really understand it and whether you're using it to optimize your return. Our webinar last week was getting bang from the payroll buck, and much of this ties back in with what we spoke about last week. So what is organizational structure? Organizational structure is your operating system. It's how you convert market demand for your goods and services into cash in your bank. That is your operating system. And if it's documented, just like with a computer or with any other thing, you have it literally, and we create this for our clients, an operating system book that details how each of the tasks and functions in your company is completed, so that you can have number one, a more clear understanding of it. Number two, a more efficient and productive system. And number three, so that you can be sure you have redundancy and you've eliminated the gaps and duplication that we talked about in Bang for Your Payroll Buck. When you go through that exercise of taking from market demand all of the different tasks that are required to get you to cash in your bank, that's what's called a quantitative analysis of functionality. And with our success partners, we will sit down and literally go through and detail each of those different tasks. Why do we do so? Well, we do it in a couple of different ways. First of all, we define each one of those tasks in terms of the result so that it ties back into your budget and your desired profit. And secondly, so that you can create meaningful job uh, descriptions so that you can hold people accountable and create rational incentives. If you have a contract with each one of your employees, in effect, that says you will give me X results, uh, and in exchange for those X results, I'll give you Y paycheck on Friday, then you have a system of accountability. And for employees who produce more than that, what you paid them for, you have a funding of incentives for them. But you also have a system of accountability, because if they have not produced the results that you have to have, then you can hold them accountable for that and rearrange things. And that's where the quantitative analysis of functionality comes in that you're allowed then to move some of those tasks and with it some of the compensation that would go with it. You can make this as involved or as simple as you want it to be, but just the process alone is an extremely worthwhile function. You can't have incentives without accountability. You can't uh, pay someone a cash incentive unless it is for excess results than what they are already being paid to do. If you do, you're simply adding to your expenses. And on the other hand, accountability is required, and you'll see why through the delegation system. It's required that you have um, a baseline for what you're expecting them to produce so that you can hold them accountable. There are a couple major barriers to productivity. One is entitlement and one is fear. Entitlement is defined as a disassociation between compensation and results. In other words, oh, the company owes me a raise because I've been here, or the company owes me more money because of this or that, or whatever it might be. The company only owes you more money if you have produced more results. And so if you have a uh, workforce that is in entitlement mode, then what do we have to do? We have to reassociate compensation much more tightly to the results that are being produced. The second type barrier is fear. And one is on the left and one's on the right. Fear is the opposite of entitlement. Fear is a lack of productivity because they don't know what's going to happen next. They're afraid of what's going to happen. They're afraid of the workforce. In truly screwed up organizational structures, you have both. It's almost impossible if you stop and think about it, how they can be in fear for their job and everything else and also be in entitlement. But there are organizations that do that. Our success partners will come in and actually measure the rate of entitlement and fear within your organization so that you make sure you're making the proper remedial efforts. If they're already in fear, we don't want to go real heavily on trying to associate, again, their compensation to results. Rather, we want to give them assurances that the company is going to be there and that they have a place in the workforce and all that sort of stuff to assuage their fears. If the company is entitlement, that's when you really can go heavier on the development of those ties between compensation and their results. A number of years ago, Stephen Covey, who put out a whole series of things, all the way from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People to turning that into calendaring and everything else. But he had a second book called First Thing First. And that in that book, he had a very, very astute analysis of what has to be done to delegate something effectively to an employee. Uh, the he didn't quite go far enough, we don't believe, though, because there's really two different viewpoints of that delegation. First is the viewpoint of the employee themselves. How is the delegation perceived by the employee? And secondly is from the viewpoint of the employer, how is the delegation observed from the viewpoint of that employer? Those are slightly separate things, and if we analyze those, we'll understand more effectively how to delegate something. And what really is delegation? It's getting someone else to do what you want them to do. particularly if they wouldn't have done it on their own. Uh, it's, it's, it's moving a responsibility to them. And it's the definition of those responsibilities that you're moving and the results they're supposed to produce that create an effective organizational structure where you can have incentives, hold people accountable, and you get the highest productivity. So let's look at both of those. From the viewpoint of the employee, what is really required? How can you delegate something to an employee? And now you're putting yourself in their shoes. Now notice I'm using the terms employee and employer very generically. It doesn't have to be an employee. It could be a partner. It could be whatever it might be. But a delegee and delegator are kind of difficult terms to throw around. So I'll call them employers and employees. So the person who's receiving the delegation, the employee, what's the first thing they have to have? They have to know what result is expected. I expect you to mail this letter. Okay, well, that's not quite good enough. Mail this letter by when, with how much postage and so on. Okay, so if they know so that it gets there by X date or whatever, all you really want to know is that letter is going to get there by such and such a date. If they take it to the post office, if they take it to UPS, if they take it to FedEx, whatever it might be, that may be their decision. But they need to know what is the results are expected. If this has to be in their hands tomorrow, it has to be in their hands next month. What is it you're delegating? Let's define the results that you are expecting them to produce. And then secondly, they have to be able to control the result. In other words, you can't expect them to, you can't expect someone to control the amount of sales if they're in operations or whatever, because they don't have any control over the sales function. And that's obviously an extreme, but they have to be able to control the result. So they have to then have enough knowledge to know what is happening and where they fall and so on, so that they can then be held accountable for the result. Now, if you are managing results, you're being very effective. If you are managing process, then you are micromanaging. And that's where you will run into trouble. You don't have to tell them, okay, how to do everything. That's the training manual. That's the training that they go through. And what you need to know is they are trained properly and that they know the results are expected from their perspective. They know what they're supposed to do. And if they're able to control it, now you can hold them accountable for those actions. It's a little more difficult on the employer or the person doing the delegating side. And in this, we have we can fall back very much so on Stephen Covey, and you can also find it on our TFG website. If you do a search there for delegation, you'll come up with a very good article on defining the level of authority of the person that you are delegating to. Very rarely do we stop and think about that. That's a very critical element. We're going to examine that in the next slide. But there's a second element and in the delegation that's required from the employer, and that is, how are you going to find out that they have actually done it? What is the feedback responsibility that you're expecting out of the delegation? Those two items we're going to explore now, and they are critical for an effective delegation. So let's start with Stephen Covey's 6 levels of authority that you are delegating. So we have someone, we want them to take over a task, whatever it may be. Okay. First, we have to make sure that they are qualified and able to perform the task. So we would start them at the lowest level of authority. And what is that? Authority? None. All they can do is observe and wait to be told. They can watch. That's about it. Hopefully learn how something is done. That's the lowest level of authority because they have none. The next level of authority is they can start asking questions. Why is it done this way? Why is this happening? Why is that happening? So on and so forth. When they move past that, they go up to making recommendations. They recommend, why don't we try this, or why don't we try that, or why don't we do it this way, or why isn't this done, or whatever it might be. The next level of authority, after you've accepted their recommendations, is they're allowed to act. But they don't just go out and act willy-nilly. They have to go out and act, but report to you immediately what they have done. Okay? In other words, yeah, you can file that or do this function, but as soon as you do it, you have to tell me that it's been done. The next level of authority is to act and report periodically. They can act, and now instead of reporting immediately, maybe it's once a day, once a week, once a month, whatever, and so on. And then the highest level of authority is they can act independently. Now let's look at that. If you're going, you have to progress people through this, and this is what training is. There are two types of employers or delegators, okay? One is the one who just throws them in the water and sees if they can swim. They start them up much too high on the scale and allow them to fail down to the level that they should have started at to begin with. And now you've created a losing situation for that employee, probably a termination, and you will find yourself losing a lot of employees over and over again. Sometimes it's from the same position because you simply start them at too high a level of authority. Then, on the other hand, you have delegators or employers who start way too low. They won't ever allow a person to progress up through the different stages. A rational program starts a person low and then allows them to progress through it as you're satisfied that they've reached each stage. And you can discuss each one of those stages with them. You can lay that out literally in their job description so that they know what the progressions are. They know when they get to reach another level, they will actually be compensated more because they're a more valuable employee. But remember, these levels are not static. They're fluid. You can have someone that seemed to make really good recommendations and then started acting on their own, reported immediately, and everything was fine, so you gave them a little more authority, and then something got screwed up. Well, move them back down and let them fluctuate between those different levels. And if you keep the person at the proper level, you will always be satisfied with where their results are. If you keep them too high, you're not going to be satisfied with the results. It'll lead to turnover and the loss of what can be very competent people. And if you never let them progress, they'll quit on their own because, or at least a good employee will, because they want more. They want to take on more responsibility. The missing link, however, which is critical, is the reporting. It was touched on in the levels of authority. Act and report immediately, act and report periodically, acting independently. The critical part of reporting in the delegation is, and the reason so many people are very poor delegators is it's easier to do it myself because they don't trust what's happening and they don't know what's happening. So you have to create a system that actually forces you to always have a comfort level of knowing what is going on, knowing things are being handled. You have to have the reporting that match that. And so what are we talking about? There's different kinds of reporting, filling out a report, whatever it might be. But that feedback that gets to you is really, really important. And it can't be you going and finding out whether the function or task was completed. Rather, it has to be them coming to you to tell you and show you that the task has been completed. Oddly enough, often the value in a report is in the compilation of the report itself, forcing the person to sit down and document their results and turn them over to you. And a report can be as simple as two numbers on a sheet of paper. Let's say you have someone who is a very high level person who is responsible for holding your gross profit to 54%. Okay, how do you want them to report? Well, every week, at the end of the week, make them determine and look up and determine what the gross profit was that week, and have them write it down on a sheet of paper. This week, gross profit was 56%. Our target is 54. And just leave it on your desk when they leave on Fridays, so that you know it's there. That is an effective form of reporting. It's got to be done in a timely, accurate, and usable manner, produced at a minimum cost. The last thing you want to do is create costly reports. Those are worthless. The value can be in the person actually compiling the report themselves. They had to look at the numbers and they had to determine, oh, okay, gee, I failed this week. Oh, gee, I did well this week, whatever it might be. But reporting is the conveyance of a comfort level to the person who did the delegating that the task has been completed and at what level. That's what they have to know. But there's more to it. There are a few different elements of reporting. Once you determine how it's going to be done, how often should it be done? Frankly, the shorter term, the better in almost every case, particularly as people work through their levels of authority. Act and report immediately would mean just what it says. As soon as it's done, you tell me what happened. Okay? Act and report periodically. That could be every day or every week at the most. Anyone who's responsible for any of the key profit indicators we discussed in some of the earlier webinars, you've got to monitor those at least every week. And so they should have immediately a system in place where every week they are providing you with a report that indicates whether or not and how they completed their tasks. So, first element is established frequency. Now, what does the report have to have? What were the results that were obtained that week? And how do they compare to the expected results? I produced 56% gross profit. We only thought they had to be 54, so we're ahead of the game. If the results are favorable, like in that case, you can reward them. It doesn't have to be money. I mean, reward them with a pat on the back. Do something to reinforce that positive behavior. The quickest way to have them stop reporting is if there's no acknowledgement of the report that they turned in. How many times have I seen a bookkeeper start with providing reports for the owner, and they pile up on the desk, and 1 month or week they decide, well, maybe I'll skip it this week, and if nothing happens and they don't see it, you think they're going to keep doing it? There has to be that automatic and very quick reinforcement, particularly if it's not only if it's negative, but also if it's favorable. If it's unfavorable, oh, I only produced 52% gross profit when it was supposed to have been 54, then you need 2 questions answered in the report. Why did you fail? And what are you going to do to change it next week or the next period, whatever it might be? Okay? It has to have that sense of urgency, and notice whose responsibility you're making the change. Your responsibility goes to them as to what are they going to do to change it the next week. So, a very common system that we establish for our clients is that person has to turn in that report on Friday, which can be very simple. It was 54, it should have been 56, blah, blah, blah. And then also on that sheet of paper is why it only came to 54 and what their plan is to change it the next week. We go a step farther then. At 7 o'clock on Monday morning. If it's unfavorable, we have a meeting to discuss that. If it's favorable, there's no meeting. You don't have to come in early. Just saying. When you receive that unfavorable report, and they write out why it was there and what their plan is to change it, hopefully, they will either be giving you an excuse or a reason. There is a critical difference between an excuse and a reason, and that is the excuse isn't true. What do I mean by that? All right, you got a 16-year-old kid. He's out there with the car. He's supposed to be back by 10 o'clock. He comes in at 10:15. As soon as he walks in and opens his mouth, he's going to give you either an excuse or a reason. What's the difference? He There could be a reason. It's possible. Okay? But the excuse is not going to be true. The reason could be something like, oh, there was a tornado and the roads were closed and I had to stop and pull this woman out of the car so that she didn't drown, and then that caused me to take the long way around and I didn't get home until 10:15. Okay, you know what? That's the reason why the kid was late. On the other hand, almost anything else he could say is simply an excuse because it's not true. The fact of the matter is he chose not to get home at 10 o'clock. So we have to look at employees the same way. Was there really an impossibility? Was it not there? And a reason, okay? Geez, the COVID virus dropped our sales by 50%, so I didn't hit my sales this week. Okay, you know what? That's a reason. On the other hand, if it's almost anything else, it's because they chose not to do whatever it took to accomplish the tasks and the results that you're paying them to do. And then comes the critical management moment. Your success will be limited to the excuses that you are willing to accept. Think about that. If you accept an excuse, you have now limited your own success. You're not going to accomplish what you set out to do because someone didn't perform and you accepted it. So when you start accepting excuses, don't blame other people, blame yourself. So what can you do instead? If you're deal with reasons why the person couldn't hit their sales number, or excuses that you're willing to accept, the first thing you have to look at is, should we retrain this person or should we replace this person? If they didn't do it, are they being trained properly? And we're accepting, that this is an excuse. It's all there is to it. It's not true. Should we retrain them or should we replace them? Harsh, but it's true. You can give them another chance by retraining. You can give another chance by retraining. But if they don't perform, sooner or later you must replace them because you have to have certain results out of that, and you haven't accepted the excuse that the person is giving you for why the performance was not completed. On the other hand, you can either accept that excuse or determine it to be a reason, in which case you have to modify your plan. Many people are modifying plans right now with the COVID virus. Our sales are down because of such, because it's an external force. So now we have to modify our plan. Our sales are no longer going to hit 6 million. This year we're going to hit 4 million because of this, and therefore we're going to modify our budget and our plan so that we can work within a $4 million sales instead of $6 million sales. But that's why you need very quick feedback with your reporting so that you can very quickly modify your plan. It's very easy to modify plans going up. People go out of business and have trouble because they don't modify their plans fast enough going down. It's a lot more fun to hire people than it is to let people go, let's put it that way. And so quick responses are what's critical, and that can tie right directly into the frequency of your reporting and how you deal with it. So if you think it's an excuse, you either retrain or replace. If you think it's a reason, you accept it and you modify your plan. Working with our success partners to perform a quantitative analysis of functionality, we usually do it through a Zoom conference, but we can do it in person. And what it means is together we will go through and document all of, as we went through in the last webinar, there's 3 functions that every business does. They get the work in, they get the work out, and they keep track of it. So what are all of the tasks within there, and how are we defining those tasks in terms of the results? And if you add up all of the results, you reach your budget, which is what we did in our first webinar. And your budget is designed to produce a minimum mandatory profit. Your budget is designed to produce a predetermined desirable result, which is that minimum mandatory percentage profit. And so we go through each one of those things, we define each one of them, and then we connect the dots to the proper person within your organization. We let them define it first, then we work out the duplication and the gaps within the system, and then lay out rational job descriptions and incentives and systems of accountability that will allow you to have full control of your company. It also gives you a playbook, a Bible, an office manual, whatever you want to call it, that documents your entire system, how you are converting market demand into cash, and how you're communicating within that system so that you know that the work is being done. Ideally, our ultimate goal, and we like to use this phrase, and I guess unless you're in Omaha, we can use it, okay, and that is, imagine your business is in Omaha, and you could never go to Omaha. What would we have to do to know that your business is going to produce the profit that you have budgeted for? What tasks have to be done? How do we know that those tasks are being completed? How would they report? How would you communicate? And so on and so forth. If we do it through Zoom, obviously it's a lot less expensive for you because you don't have to pay for travel. Some people would still prefer us to come in which case you have to pay for the travel. It's your job here, okay? And we're working very hard right now to do things through Zoom because it can work out to close to half the investment for people with the same return. You can contact us either by email at admin@tfginfo.org or give us a call at 303-338-9300. We can discuss then any sort of what the investment might be to do something like this, timing wise, what your needs are, or any other issues that you might have. Again, we are here to serve you. We want to do what's best for you, and what's best for you is to help you attain your goals. And so we go through a process that we like, first of all, to do an initial consultation where we learn more about you and learn more about your company and what your goals really are. And we'll define success then as you attaining your goals, and define failure as you not. And we'll put together an action plan to accomplish that. And very often, the quantitative analysis becomes part of that action plan that adds to your operating manual, an entire section on organizational structure, which would have job descriptions, systems of accountability, incentives, and so on and so forth. I do hope you got something out of this brief webinar here. If nothing else, simply planted some ideas as to where things could go. But frankly, you've wasted your time if you don't take some action from that. You only make money from the time you've just invested into listening to this if you actually take some action and do something. So hopefully you will do it on your own, or give us a call and see how we can help. 303-338-9300 or admin@tfginfo.org. Again, this is Dirk Dieters. I'm the Executive Director of the Fremont Group, and we hope that you'll not only watch more of our YouTube videos, but become a Patreon patron and help support our organization. Bring us in, we'll do some work, and it'll be beneficial into your bottom line. And we work for clients for life. We don't want to just come in and do something and disappear. We want to develop a relationship that will take you to your next level. So again, thank you for your time, and best in business.